The stale, recycled air of Globex Corp always smelled faintly of disappointment and burnt coffee. It was the kind of scent that clung to your clothes, your soul, and your professional aspirations like a cheap cologne. For 11 years, I'd been breathing it in, a silent, invisible architect of their digital fortress. My name? George, like my boss, which was, as you can imagine, a constant, low-grade source of existential dread. He was George, the visionary who talked in buzzwords and whose most complex strategic decision involved choosing between artisanal kombucha and ethically sourced oat milk for the executive lounge. I was George, the cybersecurity consultant, the guy who understood that the cloud wasn't just a fluffy white thing in the sky, but a vast, interconnected, and terrifyingly vulnerable ecosystem. My days were a blur of firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and the constant gnawing awareness that behind every slick corporate facade, there was a gaping hole just waiting to be exploited. I was the digital janitor, the guy who flushed out the malware, patched the breaches, and kept the digital plumbing from overflowing. It was crucial work, meticulous, demanding, and utterly thankless. My reward? The quiet satisfaction of a system secured, a threat averted, and the occasional nod from a server rack that hummed a little louder when it was running optimally. Then I found it. Not a loose thread, not a frayed cable, but a gaping chasm. A systemic flaw in Globex's core network architecture, a backdoor so wide a herd of digital elephants could canter through. It wasn't just a vulnerability, it was an engraved invitation to oblivion. It was the kind of flaw that could cripple a company, cost millions, and send personal data swirling into the dark corners of the internet like a digital garbage truck on a joyride. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm against the hum of the servers. This was it. The big one. The kind of discovery that justifies late nights, ignored social lives, and the constant, low-grade anxiety of being a cybersecurity professional. I meticulously documented every byte, every packet, every potential point of entry. I traced the exploit path, simulated attack vectors, and quantified the potential damage with the cold, hard precision of a forensic accountant. I had a comprehensive report, a digital shield ready to be deployed. The next morning, I walked into my boss, George's office, the report clutched in my hand like a winning lottery ticket. His office, unlike mine, was a monument to his perceived importance. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a solid mahogany desk that probably cost more than my car, and an abstract sculpture that looked like a mangled paperclip. He was leaning back, eyes closed, a serene expression on his face, probably dreaming of his next off-site leadership retreat. "George?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He opened one eye, a sliver of irritation crossing his features. "What is it, George? Can't you see I'm in a strategic reflection period?" Strategic reflection period. Right, which translated to, I am trying to figure out how to sound smarter than I am for the next board meeting. "Sir, I've discovered a critical security vulnerability in the network. It's potentially catastrophic." I placed the report on his desk, the crisp pages, a stark contrast to the polished wood. He picked it up gingerly, as if it were contaminated. His eyes scanned the executive summary, his brow furrowing in a way that suggested mild inconvenience rather than existential threat. He flipped through a few pages, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to what I can only describe as condescending dismissal. "Catastrophic?" he scoffed, a dismissive wave of his hand. George, you're always so dramatic. Is this another one of your overly paranoid episodes?" My jaw tightened. "Sir, this is not paranoia. This is a documented exploit. I've run simulations. The potential for a massive data breach is imminent." He chuckled a dry, rasping sound. "Imminent. Right. You know, George, we appreciate your dedication, but HR and I have discussed your intensity. You're becoming a distraction to the team. Always raising alarms, always seeing dragons where there are only friendly sheep." Friendly sheep? My internal alarm bells were screaming at a frequency only dogs could hear. "Sir, these aren't sheep. They're wolves in digital clothing, and they're already at the gate. We need to act now. We need to implement the patches, reinforce the firewalls." He held up a hand, cutting me off mid-sentence. His voice was smooth, almost patronizing. "George, we've been over this. Your concerns have been heard. They've been evaluated. And the consensus is that this is a non-issue, a minor anomaly. You're seeing problems that aren't there because you're looking for them. Frankly, you're becoming a bit of a bottleneck for innovation." He pushed the report back towards me. "I'm sorry, George, but we're going to have to let you go. Your position is being eliminated due to restructuring. You've been a distraction." The words hit me like a physical blow. Fired. For doing my job. For trying to protect the very company that was now discarding me like yesterday's news. The mahogany desk, the sweeping view, the sheer arrogance of it all, it was too much. I stood there for a moment, the report heavy in my hand, the silence in the office amplifying the frantic thumping of my own heart. I could have yelled, I could have pleaded, I could have pointed out the sheer idiocy of his decision, the monumental risk he was taking, but I knew, with a chilling certainty, that it wouldn't matter. He was deaf to reason, blind to truth, and utterly convinced of his own genius. So, I did what I always did when faced with an insurmountable problem. I took a breath, squared my shoulders, and adopted the most professional demeanor I could muster. I understand, I said, my voice surprisingly even. I'll pack my things. As I walked out of his office, the scent of burnt coffee seemed to mock me. The hushed whispers of my colleagues as I passed by were a symphony of pity and curiosity. I was the cautionary tale, the guy who saw ghosts and got ghosted. But as I gathered my personal belongings from my small windowless cubicle, a mug that read "World's OKest Cybersecurity Guy," a framed photo of my dog, and a well-worn copy of The Art of War, a different kind of resolve began to solidify within me. They thought they were firing a distraction. They were wrong. They were firing a fuse. The walkout of Globex Corp felt like a march. Not a defeated march, but a determined one. The automatic doors slid open, revealing a bright, indifferent world. As I stepped out onto the bustling street, the sunlight felt harsh, almost accusatory. I ignored the urge to look back, to see if anyone was watching, to witness my professional demise. My colleagues might have seen it as a tragedy, a corporate injustice, but I saw it as an intermission. My apartment, blessedly free of burnt coffee and buzzwords, felt like a sanctuary. I kicked off my shoes, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old books a welcome balm. The adrenaline from the firing was slowly receding, replaced by a steely clarity. They wanted to call me paranoid? They wanted to dismiss my findings as a non-issue? Fine, let them. Because while they were busy congratulating themselves on their structuring and celebrating their visionary leader, I had a plan that didn't involve spreadsheets or synergy sessions. A plan that involved documentation, discretion, and the cold, hard truth. I pulled out my personal laptop, a sleek, powerful machine that I'd meticulously customized for exactly this kind of scenario. This wasn't just a computer, it was my digital vault, my secure fortress. I powered it on, the familiar chime, a comforting sound. The desktop was bare, meticulously organized, with a single folder front and center, Globex Vulnerabilities Personal Archive. With a few keystrokes, I began encrypting the entire directory. I used a military-grade encryption algorithm, a fortress of code that even the most determined hacker would struggle to breach. This wasn't just about protecting my work. It was about safeguarding the truth. Inside that folder were detailed reports, simulated attack logs, evidence of the critical flaw I'd discovered, and so much more. Years of finding and fixing, of patching the holes they never even knew existed. All of it meticulously documented, cross-referenced, and time-stamped. They thought they were eliminating a problem. They had no idea they were just setting the stage. Then, I opened a new tab and navigated to a specific, encrypted corner of the internet. A place known only to those who operated in the shadows of cybersecurity, a digital speakeasy for ethical hackers and digital guardians. I opened a secure messaging client and began to type. My fingers flew across the keyboard, each word carefully chosen. I was reaching out to the Cypher Collective, a legendary white hat hacking group renowned for their integrity and their unparalleled skills. They were the digital equivalent of the cavalry, the ones you called when the cavalry was needed, but no one else knew how to summon. I outlined my situation, briefly explaining my dismissal and the critical vulnerability I had uncovered. I didn't embellish, didn't plead. I simply presented the facts, along with a secure link to a carefully curated portion of my archive, just enough to pique their interest, just enough to demonstrate the severity. I asked for their professional opinion, a second pair of eyes on my findings, a validation that I wasn't, in fact, the paranoid lunatic my former boss seemed to think I was. The response came faster than I'd anticipated, a single encrypted message that landed in my inbox like a digital hawk. It was brief, to the point, and utterly reassuring. Your findings are significant. We will be in touch. I leaned back in my chair, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across my apartment. The apartment that was now my command center. Globex Corp had fired me, yes. They had dismissed my warnings, silenced my voice, and tried to erase my contribution. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They couldn't fire my knowledge. They couldn't encrypt my evidence. And they certainly couldn't erase the fact that I had meticulously laid the groundwork for my own form of corporate justice. The game, as they say, was afoot. And I was the only one playing with a full deck. The following weeks were a masterclass in controlled chaos from my perspective. While Globex Corp hummed along, blissfully ignorant, its digital foundations were slowly, meticulously being eroded. The first sign, subtle as a phantom limb, was a series of uncharacteristic system slowdowns. Nothing catastrophic, nothing that would trigger immediate alarms for their less than stellar IT department. But enough to cause minor frustrations for employees. Deadlines that were once met with predictable efficiency began to slip. Key client portals experienced intermittent outages, blamed on unforeseen technical difficulties. Emails that should have been processed instantly began to queue up, their timestamps a silent testament to a network under strain. I received a text from Sarah in accounting, a woman I'd shared countless late-night pizza deliveries with during critical month-end closings. George, is everything okay with the network? Everything's crawling today? My expense reports are taking forever to submit. I replied with a carefully crafted, vaguely apologetic, working on some system optimizations, should be resolved soon. Next, a panicked call from David, the head of sales. He caught me at a moment when I was carefully orchestrating a simulated denial of service attack, a controlled burn designed to highlight the very vulnerabilities my former boss had dismissed. George, what in God's name is going on? Our primary CRM just went down for 20 minutes. We're losing potential leads by the minute. HR says you're still consulting, but no one can reach you. David, I said, my voice low and measured, ensuring my tone conveyed concern, not culpability. I'm looking into a critical network integrity issue. I need more information on the exact failure point for the CRM. Can you send me the error logs as soon as they're available? I was, of course, already accessing those logs. Thanks to the back door I deliberately left open. The irony was almost too delicious. The panic was palpable, even from my vantage point outside the company walls. Internal emails, forwarded by a sympathetic junior analyst who still remembered my help with her dissertation data, painted a picture of escalating chaos. Urgent, network performance degradation, read one subject line. Another, critical alert, data access issues impacting Project Phoenix. Project Phoenix, my former boss's pet project, a massive digital transformation initiative that was now teetering on the brink of collapse. All because he dismissed the very person who knew its infrastructure inside and out. The Cypher Collective, true to their word, began their intricate dance. They weren't brute forcing their way in, they were finesse. Tiny, almost imperceptible nudges to the system, subtle manipulations of routing protocols, carefully timed packets that exploited the very weaknesses I documented. It was like a surgeon making microscopic incisions, each one designed to weaken the patient without alerting the attending physician. Then came the day when the meticulously constructed illusion began to fracture in earnest. It wasn't a single dramatic event, but a series of calculated strikes. The main data warehouse, the heart of Globex Corp's operations, became inaccessible. Not a complete shutdown, but a corruption of critical index tables, rendering vast swaths of data unreadable without specialized recovery protocols. Protocols that only I possessed. Simultaneously, the Cypher Collective, with my explicit instructions, initiated a series of encrypted communications with key business partners, subtly leaking information about Globex's unforeseen technical challenges. Nothing that directly implicated me, nothing that could be traced back. But enough to sow seeds of doubt, to make clients question Globex's reliability. My phone buzzed with a frantic group chat message from a former colleague. Has anyone heard from George? They're saying the entire network is compromised. HR is in lockdown. My boss is losing his mind. Another followed shortly after. They're blaming external hackers. But IT says it looks like internal sabotage. Security is everywhere. They're asking for everyone's laptop. This was it. The prelude to the main event. They were realizing the extent of the damage, but still grasping for an external enemy. They couldn't conceive that the threat had come from within, from the paranoid consultant they'd so readily dismissed. My turn. I logged into my secure personal email, the one I'd used to contact the Cypher Collective. I composed a single, polite email addressed to the CEO of Globex Corp. I didn't CC anyone on this first salvo, keeping it strictly between me and the top. The subject line was simple, regarding network integrity and critical data breach. I wrote, "Dear Mr. Sterling, I am writing to formally address the ongoing critical network integrity issues at Globex Corp. As you may be aware, the situation has escalated significantly, impacting core operations and client access. I understand that the current investigation is focusing on external threats. However, Based on my prior analysis and extensive documentation, the current crisis is a direct result of systemic vulnerabilities within the Globex network architecture that were previously identified and reported. Failure to address these critical flaws has led to the current operational paralysis. I paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. Then, I added the crucial element. To ensure transparency and facilitate immediate remediation, I have provided the relevant regulatory bodies, including the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and the Data Protection Authority, with a detailed technical report outlining these vulnerabilities and the potential impact. I have also provided this report to our key business partners to ensure their awareness and preparedness. I believe swift and decisive action, guided by accurate technical insight, is paramount to mitigating further damage and restoring operational stability. I am available for consultation should you require expert assistance in resolving this complex situation. I attached a redacted version of my comprehensive report, heavily encrypted, to the email. Redacted enough to prevent immediate exploitation if intercepted, but detailed enough to prove my foresight and their negligence. I hit send. The message reverberated through the corporate ether like a sonic boom. The immediate panic at Globex Corp was likely unimaginable. They had not only dismissed a critical warning, but had actively ignored it, and now the chickens were coming home to roost, not just in terms of financial loss and operational paralysis, but also in the cold, hard glare of regulatory scrutiny and corporate partner disaffection. They knew they were in trouble, and they knew that trouble had a name: George. But they still didn't understand the full depth of the mess they were in, or the extent of the leverage I now held. The counterplay had begun, and the endgame was in sight. The following days were a blur of frantic, whispered conversations within the confines of Globex Corp, a stark contrast to the carefully orchestrated calm I was projecting from my own quiet sanctuary. My phone, once a silent witness to my quiet diligence, now buzzed with an almost constant stream of panicked messages. Not from my former colleagues this time, who were likely too scared to breathe the wrong way, but from an official Globex Corp number, an unknown number that I'd initially dismissed as spam. It kept calling. Then came the email. The subject line was a stark departure from the usual corporate jargon: urgent request for consultation, network crisis. The sender was listed as the chief legal officer, a name I vaguely recalled from onboarding documents, a stern-faced woman who looked perpetually unimpressed. I opened it, a slow smile spreading across my face. The tone was a desperate plea, masquerading as a formal request. It detailed the unprecedented technical challenges facing the company, and with a palpable undercurrent of desperation, mentioned the proactive engagement of regulatory bodies. They were cornered, and they knew it. I waited a full 24 hours before responding, allowing the pressure to build. My reply was brief, polite, and entirely devoid of emotion. I didn't offer condolences for their predicament, nor did I gloat. I simply stated my availability and proposed a meeting at a neutral location, a sterile, anonymous conference room in a business park miles away from Globex HQ. A place where no one could be overheard and where the air conditioning was as cold and impartial as my intentions. The day of the meeting arrived, crisp and clear. As I walked into the designated room, I saw them. The chief legal officer, her face etched with exhaustion and anxiety, and by her side, a man whose name I recognized from the initial firing, Mr. Henderson, the head of HR, looking considerably less smug than he had the day he dismissed me. He clutched a thick folder like a life raft. They greeted me with forced smiles, their eyes darting nervously between me and the secure briefcase I carried. Inside, not a weapon, but something far more devastating. The complete, unredacted, fully validated data of my findings, meticulously organized and backed by the Cipher Collective's independent verification. The CLO began, her voice tight. Mr. George, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. As you know, Globex Corp is facing an unprecedented crisis. The current network situation is dire, and the implications of the regulatory investigations are significant. Indeed, I replied, my voice calm and measured. I recall presenting a rather detailed report on similar potential issues some time ago. Henderson shifted uncomfortably. Yes, well, in hindsight, perhaps we didn't fully appreciate the scope of your concerns. Hindsight, I mused, leaning back in my chair. A valuable tool, isn't it? Especially when employed before a company's entire digital infrastructure crumbles. So what can I do for you? The CLO took a deep breath. We need your expertise, Mr. George. We need you to help us navigate this. Our internal teams are overwhelmed. The damage is extensive. We need to restore operations, address the regulatory inquiries, and, frankly, mitigate the fallout. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I opened my briefcase and placed a single, thick document on the table between us. It was a summary of the potential legal and financial ramifications for Globex Corp, compiled with the help of the Cipher Collective's legal counsel. This, I began, my voice dropping slightly, is what you're really here for. You're not just asking for my technical expertise, you're asking me to save you from yourselves. And for that, there are options. Henderson visibly paled. The CLO, however, maintained a steely gaze. Options? Indeed. Option A, I continued, my finger tracing a line on the document. You reinstate me as Chief Cybersecurity Officer with a full apology, a significant salary increase, double my previous compensation, and a substantial bonus. You publicly acknowledge my prior warnings and the company's failure to act. You grant me full autonomy over all security-related decisions, reporting directly to the board. You also agree to the immediate termination of Mr. Sterling and Mr. Henderson, effective immediately, for gross negligence and dereliction of duty. This option involves significant public relations management to frame it as a proactive step towards enhanced security, but the core issue of your executive incompetence remains an internal matter, albeit with heads rolling. Henderson visibly flinched at his name. The CLO's jaw tightened, but she remained silent, listening intently. Option B, I said, my voice hardening slightly as I tapped another section of the document. This is the nuclear option. I provide the regulatory bodies with my complete, unredacted report detailing every single vulnerability, every instance of willful negligence, and every potential data compromise. The Data Protection Authority levies maximum fines. Key clients, alerted to the ongoing risks and the company's inability to secure their data, begin pulling their contracts. The board, facing overwhelming evidence of mismanagement and potential criminal liability, initiates a hostile takeover or forces a complete liquidation. This scenario results in billions in financial losses, irreparable damage to the Globex brand, and potentially personal legal repercussions for those involved in the cover-up. Your careers, and the company as you know it, are finished. I close the document, the soft thud echoing in the sterile room. The choice, gentlemen and madam, is yours. But understand this, my offer is not negotiable. It is a lifeline, and it is tied to a very short timer. The CLO looked at Henderson, a silent conversation passing between them. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, she turned back to me, her eyes hard but filled with a dawning realization of their predicament. Option A, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. We accept option A. Henderson looked like he'd been punched in the gut. He started to stammer, but this is, I don't think the CEO will. The CEO made the decision to fire me based on your advice, I interjected, my gaze unwavering. He can now live with the consequences of that decision, or the consequences of accepting my terms. The choice is his, but the decision on my end is final. Within hours, the wheels of corporate bureaucracy, once slow and grinding, were now spinning at breakneck speed. The CLO, with the full authority of a desperate board, began the intricate dance of implementing option A. Henderson was escorted out of the building by security, his face a mask of disbelief and fear, his folder of evidence rendered utterly useless. Sterling, the former boss George, was informed that his strategic vision had led to a catastrophic oversight, and he was being offered a generous severance package to pursue opportunities elsewhere, a euphemism for immediate dismissal. My own return was orchestrated with maximum damage control. A carefully worded press release announced my reappointment as Chief Cybersecurity Officer, emphasizing my long-standing expertise and critical role in fortifying Globex's digital defenses. My previous dismissal was spun as a period of external professional development. The narrative was carefully curated, the reality buried. The next morning, I walked back into Globex Corp, not as a disgruntled ex-employee, but as the man in charge. The office, which had once smelled of disappointment, now carried an undercurrent of fear. My former colleagues greeted me with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The security team, previously dismissive, now saluted me with an almost reverent respect. My new office was the one previously occupied by my former boss. It was larger, brighter, and significantly more ostentatious. On the polished mahogany desk, nestled amongst the official documents for my reappointment, was a small, discreet package. Inside, a single, perfectly crafted security key, etched with my name and a small handwritten note. Welcome back, George. The real work begins now. It was from the Cipher Collective, a silent acknowledgement of a job well done, and a reminder that the digital realm always has its guardian. Globex Corp, humbled and chastened, was now under my watchful eye. The network vulnerabilities were being systematically patched, the firewalls reinforced, and a robust, proactive security infrastructure was being implemented. The threat of external hackers, once their convenient scapegoat, now felt like a distant echo. The real threat had been internal incompetence, and that had been dealt with. And as for the individuals who had dismissed me, who had called me paranoid and a distraction, they were now facing their own form of distraction. Henderson was likely embroiled in damage control and looking for a new career path. Sterling, stripped of his buzzwords and his illusion of genius, was probably facing intense board scrutiny and a future far less glamorous than he'd imagined. Their corporate revenge, for me, was not about malice, but about restoration, about ensuring that competence was rewarded and negligence had consequences. I sat at my new desk, the city skyline, a familiar, yet now different, panorama. The scent of burnt coffee was still faintly present, but it was now mingled with the crisp, clean scent of a system secured, of a threat neutralized, of a corporate titan brought to its knees by its own hubris. The endgame had been played, the checkmate secured. It was a quiet victory, built on meticulous preparation, strategic patience, and the unwavering certainty that truth, like data, will always find a way to be secured. If watching corporate hubris meet its match and seeing justice served with a side of digital precision resonates with you, then consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support fuels these stories and ensures that more tales of calculated comeuppance are brought to light. Because in the end, it's not about vengeance, it's about balance. And sometimes, the most satisfying equilibrium is achieved when the architects of chaos are forced to confront the foundations they so carelessly ignored.